Welcome to episode 41 of the Camera Shake podcast. We're back alive and kicking. This time we're shaking it up with a very special guest. But before we get into that, let me just tell you about the YouTube channel that we just managed to name. It's now called youtube.com/Camera Shake. As you know, we've been working very hard at getting these 100 subscribers. We've made it. So if you are listening to the audio version of this podcast, please go ahead and jump over to YouTube. If you want to see our lovely faces, what can I say? Just do it. Hit that subscribe button, obviously, if you were so inclined. That would help us out. Likewise, if you're listening to the audio version, please enjoy our sultry voices. Now, without further ado, let's get right into it. Today's guest, and I am so thrilled to be able to announce this and to have him on the show. Today's guest is none other than conceptual photographer, Photoshop guru, and the face, voice, and genius behind the educational platform Phlearn. Give it up for Mr. Aaron Nace. Aaron, how are you doing today?
Thank you so much. I'm fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. This is going to be so much fun.
Awesome. I'm super thrilled. Like I said, I'm super thrilled to have you on the show because I can honestly say that probably 99% of what I know about Photoshop, I have learned by watching your videos on YouTube, and the remaining 1% were just sheer accident.
I feel like 99% of what I learned about Photoshop was sheer accident. There's a dude with too much free time on his hands.
Well, we'll talk about how you got into Phlearn in the first place. But before we get into all of that, you're not at home right now. You're in Atlanta at the moment.
I'm currently in Atlanta. I'm just like in between. COVID's a really interesting thing for a lot of reasons, but one of those things is that it pushed our business to be remote. And at first it was like really scary to do that. And I honestly just like, I don't know. I feel like it ripped the Band-Aid off and it was like, you got no choice. Like, this is how it is now. And so, leaving back behind our studio and, we had like an office where people would come to work and, we had a pretty good routine going. But I'll tell you, after, what has it been? Almost a year now, which is nuts. It's just kind of pushed things to the place where we've gotten comfortable operating out of anywhere. So I live in Chicago technically, but I haven't even been there in months. I've been spending the last few months in staying with family in Dallas, Texas. And now I'm with family in Atlanta, Georgia. And then I'm going to be going, back to Dallas in a bit. And then who knows from there. It's been a really cool ride to see like, okay, cool. Like, let's embrace this remote thing. Like, let's make it actually like, let's take advantage of the best parts of it that we can. And, for us, that's been, being distributed and kind of just like keeping on with our schedule. Like, let's just make it happen no matter where we're at. So yeah, I'm a little bit of a vagabond these days.
Do you think you're going to keep some of the aspects of remote working even when things go back to normal?
We're going to keep 100% of the aspects of remote working. Yeah, it's the decision's been made already. We are committed to a fully distributed working team for the foreseeable future. Yep. Yeah, it's we've embraced it. And honestly, I'm super excited about it. It's there have been a lot of challenges along the way, but I feel like it's kind of forced us to reevaluate how we operate the business as a whole. And I think we're doing really well, even in spite of the fact we don't get to see each other on a day-to-day basis, personally, but, we still do Zoom calls and things like that. And I feel like we're real lucky because we had a very strong team in a physical environment before COVID. So like the team is like really, really solid. And we haven't had to onboard too many people purely remotely. Like we were already a tight-knit team. So, those relationships are bonded, we're good. We're a strong team. And the fact that we meet on Zoom rather than in person definitely has its drawbacks, but it's all good. To be honest, it's like I think it just depends a lot on especially what type of business you run, and then what type of um, how you want to run your business. I'm more of like a, hey, if you get your work done and we hit our deadlines, cool. Like work whenever you want, like just chill, like it's fine. I think, for if I was more inclined to be like, at your desk, from 9 a.m. to 5 a.m. and no leaving, I think that would be real hard to do remotely. And for me, to be honest, I don't think that would, I just don't think that makes that much sense for remote work in general. It's like, how many times in life are you like, oh God, I didn't sleep last night, and it's 12 in the afternoon before I even feel good, and like, I'm gonna show up to work from like 2 to 6 p.m. and that's all I got today because I'm a human. I'm not a robot. Like that's just what I got in me. Yeah. And like, remote work it's actually really good because it allows space for that. And 2 to 6 p.m. if that's what you got, like as long as you're hitting your work deadlines, like cool, we're good to go. Like got a good team behind you, show up and do your best when you can, and as long as we fill up all the gaps, totally works out.
That's one of these things, isn't it? Because I mean, at the moment, it's with everything that's going on, in the world, and with COVID, and politically and all that. I mean, I can imagine a lot of people aren't sleeping too well right now. So it's like, I mean, those are the kind of things to take into consideration. Of course, when you have a team, when you run a team, when you run a business, and you have to look after the people that work for you, and it's especially important in a time. I think it's always important, but it's especially important now.
Yeah, so. For sure. And like we lose our gym times. Like I was, for me, cardio activity is like, it's important. If I don't get enough of it, I don't operate at my highest potential for sure. And so basically, as soon as COVID happened, it was like, okay, I can't go to the gym anymore. I can't, get the good cardio in like I was used to doing. So I've had to, kind of like restructure that. And yeah, definitely like sleep, like, and just in general, anxiety levels throughout like the world, everyone is like operating at like slightly higher anxiety levels. And we, that can affect sleep. It can affect just performance in general. It can impact outlook towards the future. And, so what we're trying to do as a business is just like make a lot of room for that and be like, like we got you. Like this is, we're humans navigating this situation together, like let's make sure to like make a lot of space for that. So like, if, whatever you need to make it through this time, like, that's number one. And, if we need to adjust some schedules for work, that's always going to be, accommodating to what our people actually need.
In a previous life, I worked in corporate for many years, and actually we trialed working from home and remote working for a lot of our teams, and actually we ended up finding productivity, just from a corporate perspective, productivity actually rose. And the reason we never tried it before is that concern that people wouldn't commit too much. But actually, what you end up doing is you work what would have been your commute time, let's say. You end up doing that. You end up just answering whatever, working in the evenings more. That may or may not be a good thing, obviously. But are you finding that actually, and I'm guessing you probably are, given that you've made the decision to go fully remote from now on, are you finding actually similar results over the last year or so?
You know what? I'm definitely finding that we're getting as much done, if not more done, in just less time. There would be days when I would go to the office and whatever, like let's say I wasn't feeling my best that day, maybe I would be at the office for 8 hours, but actually getting stuff done, 2 to 3 hours, maybe. I mean, there were also days when I was like, I'm a rock star. I'm going to do that all day. Nothing can touch me. I'm caffeined up and, like I'm going to solve every problem today. But, there were definitely days where like a couple hours of work is all I had in me. And then I felt guilty about like not being at the office. So what I would wind up doing is just like kind of like trying to do a weird hide where I would just kind of watch videos like YouTube, but like pretend that I was working, and I felt guilty about it. It was just a lot of weird stuff. And then, with COVID and distributed working, I just don't worry about that stuff anymore. It's like, I don't, there's no like weird shame about like being at the office at a certain time. And, I think that, productivity comes and goes. There's anyone that I know who's been doing, especially like a same type of like job or whatever. So Phlearn turns 10 years old this year. So it's been 10 years,
Wow.
and it's like, we've had our periods of like bang, 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 get it all done. And then we've had our periods of like, dragging our feet through the mud. And like, that's just life and human nature. And I think like, I don't know, like not having to feel bad about the periods of time when it's a slog, is really helpful in general. And again, I'm real happy and, really just thankful to have such a great team of people that I work with. We all kind of like pick each other up and hold each other accountable because, especially, I mean, there was a month there, I think we were like 2 or 3 months into COVID, where I was just like, I was like, I don't want to do any of this, like anything that was my job, I didn't want to do. But my team was there to pick me back up, and it like we just worked through it, as a team. So that's been really good, and just being like a I don't know, almost. I mean, the people that you work with ultimately, like, especially in a small company like ours, we're all very integral. We all wear a lot of hats, so, and it's very obvious if someone's not doing their work, so it's like, but we also try to engender like feelings of like, support rather than like shame or, anger or like competitiveness or, and every business is going to be so different on how they're structured. And, Nick, you probably know from the corporate world, like, a lot of people are just trying to climb that corporate ladder, and like different people handle that in different ways. Some people do it like in a very generous and like, I'm just going to be the best person I can be and show up and do that. But then some people resort to like the competitive nature and, trying to push others down to get themselves up. And, that sort of thing can happen. But, I think we're real lucky in that, like, for our team anyway, I think we all just feel like we're together, and that there's no benefit for pushing anyone down on the team. It's like, there's enough room on this life raft for all of us. Like, let's make sure we're all on it.
I think a lot of small businesses can learn a lot from you. That sounds like a very pleasant and incredibly productive way of working. It's,
I'll tell you, man, it's a constant work in progress. And I know I've got a lot to learn. I'm in an interesting like spot because, so after college, I went to go work for like a relatively small, but like kind of corporate-y environment. And I just didn't fit in really that well. It wasn't for me. I did my best to like try to do my job and stuff, but it became obvious pretty quick that was not, I was not great material for the position. But I also totally feel like, so from there, I left and then I started my own thing. But I do feel in some ways like I kind of missed out from a lot of like the structure and like knowledge and system making and organizational structure that that a lot of people do benefit from larger or structured organizations. Because you know, again, as years go by, and I'm like, oh, bookkeeping. We should do bookkeeping, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's like number 2 in like the bookkeeping for dummies book, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, you know, or like marketing. Oh, that's why McDonald's puts up billboards everywhere. Oh,
Yeah, it's a thing.
That's a part of it too, you know? So like, yeah, there are definite pros and cons.
But I think, I mean, that's really, that's like a typical thing though, when you're coming to running a business from being a creative person, you know, it's the creativity that drives you there, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you know anything about business at all.
Nothing.
You know,
yeah, nothing.
like you know, in my past, I studied music and I ran like a contemporary music school for over a decade. And man, I had to learn on the job, because just because I know how to play the guitar does not mean I know how to run a business and to do payroll and like, you know, tax and all that kind of jazz, all the kind of stuff you have to do, you know. And of course, at first, you know, I'm guessing it's probably similar for you, but at first you're a one-man band, you know, and then
100%.
And then it kind of eventually kind of get to the point where you realize, I don't have to do all of that myself. I can actually get somebody else to do this for me. You know,
Exactly. And that's a good feeling. And then, you know, also like the other side of that is, so yeah, definitely in the beginning, like you got to do it all, right? You got to figure out what you can figure out. And then, you know, slowly you realize I suck at this. Like, this is not my strong suit. I got to find someone who's good at it and who I trust and they can do it. And I got to, you know, work for them. And then, you know, I've also experienced the flip side of that, where like fast forward years down the line and I've given complete like trust and like control and, you know, authority to someone else on a project. But the mistake that I've made sometimes is I've also like kind of made that, okay, I don't need to know what's going on with that piece of the business anymore because like they got it. So I would kind of check out. So there'd be areas that I would just like not even pay attention to sometimes for, you know, periods of, you know, long periods of time. And then kind of come to the realization that I have no idea what's happening with this or that in my business. Like, yes, I've found someone I trust who can handle this, and like I trust that they handle it, but I've lost perspective of these vital parts of the business too. So gone through the period of time, you know, being like, okay, yes, like definitely get people you trust and work with and know how to do this stuff, hopefully better than you do. But at the same time, it's really important to like stay up with that information. Like make sure that like, okay, you hire someone to do all your SEO. Like, you know, I wouldn't necessarily just recommend being like, okay, you do SEO now for the next X amount of years. I'll do none of it. I would, you know, tell myself 10 years ago, be like, just make sure you follow up with that person and know what they're doing. And like, you know, make sure that you understand what they're doing too, because that's a big thing, especially with team members. And I mean, if you find great people you trust, like that's paramount, you know, good,
for sure,
motivated, enthusiastic, smart people you trust. That's number one. But there's just all kinds of things that can slip through the cracks, you know, due to either ignorance or negligence or, you know, just a whole bunch of other factors. It's like life, you know.
Yeah, exactly. I think we've made us, or a lot of people who start running businesses, you know, without having been to like business school, which is probably the vast majority of small business owners, I would say, you know, start a business because of a skill set that they have, you know, you know, and sort of what's the word? Like uncovering yourself from part of that business, because that's the one thing that you don't like doing. Is, I think, it's a fairly typical thing for me. I remember it was the whole bookkeeping thing. I was always the creative part in my business, and I had a business partner and she was like, doing the finances and the books and all the kind of boring stuff. And that didn't actually work out too well. So, we've all made our mistakes there at one point, but it teaches you a lesson, and it makes you a better person afterwards, because it is a lesson learned.
Yeah. And I think I've been through similar situations with you, Kirsten, and I like similar stuff when I'm just like, all right, you do the books, but a part of like, okay, let's say we're our own business owner. Now I own a business, right? Like, just inherent in that fact is that no one in the world is going to care as much of you as your business as you will. Like, it doesn't, even if you give them like percentage ownership of the company, they're not going to care as much as you, because you started it. It's your company. Like, if it goes belly under, you go belly under. Like, there's, no one has as much on the line as you do. So, I do recommend having people help out with things that either take a lot of time, minutia, like bookkeeping is one of those things. So fast forward to like today, I have a bookkeeper, but I also review all the books and keep my own books. And I'm a lot more active in things like bookkeeping and finances and taxes and things like that than I have been in the past. And it's not like the most fun thing necessarily, and it's not the most it's not creative, it's minutia. But at the end of the day, if I have a really good sense of our books, it allows me to run the business better. It allows me to make better financial decisions for the company as a whole. If I'm like, okay, here's where we are at now. We've got some pretty big expenses coming up here, and here. We need to make sure to budget them. So if I go out and like start this project now and spend X amount of money, and I'm not aware of like some larger expenses that are coming up in the future, it could mean that 6 months from now, we're going to be in a tight financial bind. And I could have foreseen that happening had I paid closer attention to the books and either scaled down some of the projects or just sequenced things a little bit better to be like, okay, yes, I do want to make this change and I want to make this project happen, but it's got to wait 6 months realistically for it to happen. That's going to keep us from getting, in a financial squeeze that's ultimately just going to make us all stressed out and not be productive for the company as a whole. Because, as soon as the money gets tight, it's like the old thing. It's like everyone's getting along when the money's good, And as soon as the money gets tight, it's like, who are we pointing fingers at for this? Anyway.
So when you first started making videos like 10 years ago, did you ever think that you were going to be in this position now?
No, no, definitely not. No, not at all, man. When I first started, honestly, my focus was on, I wanted to be a commercial photographer. Like that's what I wanted to do. That was my dream. And for me, YouTube was like kind of just a cool platform to like, do a few things, give back and like try to share some of this knowledge that I had accumulated about Photoshop and photography. That was just a cool thing in general. And also a way I wanted to like help build a little bit of credibility behind a brand that I was associated with too, so that, I could approach clients and just be like, okay, this is a good starting place, as a client. But then relatively quickly, I would say within the first 2 years, I realized that, I was actually really enjoying being an educator and enjoying that whole side of it, and kind of came to the realization that I wasn't actually as interested in being a commercial photographer as I originally thought I was going to be. and that was a cool realization, so it was a little bit of like, there's always that struggle between like, you know, looking back, it's like, what would it have been like if I would have been a commercial photographer? But, at the end of the day, it's like, I feel like life kind of takes you down the path you're meant to go in a lot of ways. And, this was obviously what I was supposed to be doing the whole time. And I feel really lucky in a lot of ways because, having a business, especially like, like the one that I was able to do, is I feel like it's a really good chance to like play to your strengths. And it's almost like, it's like a very crystal clear, it's like a crystal lens into your own life. Like if you're good at something in business, it's going to show through. And if you're bad at something in business, it's going to show through, like there's no hiding. So it's a really cool way to like know yourself and know who you are. So like, for instance, for me, like, on the commercial photography side, like, cold calling and pitching and doing decks and, client relationships and things like that. Those aren't necessarily my strong suits, and they never have been. Like, that's kind of just like not necessarily how I operate. I'm a little bit more of like an introverted type of a person. I like doing my creative projects. So the idea of like, building networks and things like that in order to build a business, like I wanted to kind of do it my way. And YouTube was a cool way to do that because I could just like sit at my house and make videos and build a network, but do it in a way to where, I wasn't like showing up to social events and be like, hey, check out my company or whatever. That didn't fit with my personality. So I would say like for anyone trying to do their own business or whatever, try to just, if you can, and gather yourself with like people you love and who really, really know you, and just be like, hey, like, what am I good at? And what am I not good at? And like, don't try to force it, like I think that finding our own unique strengths, like we all have them. We all have, things we are really good at. And, life and business can totally be carved out of those things. And then, finding someone else who's good at the things that maybe you're lacking or, that frustrate you or that you're just not going to do. Because like you said, bookkeeping, accounting, taxes, marketing, like all these things, they need to get done. Like for a business to work and for a business to like run, that stuff is really important. It really is. And if you don't want to do it to the point where you're not gonna do it, like find someone to help you out and make sure that, you're on the same page and that you guys kind of both understand what's going on. But, there's great software out there for like bookkeeping and stuff like that too, that kind of helps make it a little bit easier.
Yeah. I find that, and I've certainly found this myself, but with those, we'll just stick on the bookkeeping example for a second, is I find that most people who end up not doing it it's not necessarily because they really, really don't want to do it. It's because they don't know how. And
definitely.
I certainly, and I if I don't know how to do something that I'm not particularly interested in, I'm never inclined to go and do the research to find out how to do it. However, if I am generally interested in it, this is why I end up on your channel all the time, is if I am interested in it, I'm going to go research it and I'm going to research the hell out of it until I'm brilliant at it.
Exactly. And I do the same thing it happens to me when I want to buy stuff too. Like if I'm excited about something, I'm going to buy something and it's kind of like a big purchase. I'll spend just way too much time learning every silly little thing about this thing, Yeah. Well, I mean, whatever it is, I'm just going to like dive it because it's fun, right? It's like, like the learning process of something that you want to do or something that you're interested in, that it's fun time. It's like playtime, and spreadsheets is usually work time. That's not for everyone. I'll tell you though, over the last year, I've really come to dig spreadsheets. Google Sheets is my jam. I haven't even used a calculator in like months because I do everything on Google Sheets now. And for those of you guys who don't know, you can do advanced awesome calculations on Microsoft Excel is cool too. I just use Google Sheets because it's free and it's cloud-based and I can share it with everyone. But like as far as the operations of our business go, I would say Google Sheets is like an integral part of the operations of our company. Like spreadsheets are not to be underestimated. And I found this out in year like 9. Okay. They're super cool. So, okay, I'm going to just give my like brief spiel on bookkeeping. Basically, like, for anyone starting a business, I would recommend as soon as you possibly can get, go ahead and register the business. Depending on where you're at in the world, you're probably going to get a tax ID number. So in the United States, the business gets a separate tax ID number. And then with that number and an address, you can go ahead and open up a bank account for that business. I would recommend doing this as soon as possible. Go ahead and get your LLC registered, set up a different bank account for the business. And that way you can start tracking all of the business expenses purely through that bank account. And then, maybe in time you're going to get a debit or credit card in the name of that bank account too. And then, once a month, you can just go to those, go to the bank website, go to the credit card website, go to all of the websites in which you are spending or earning money and download a CSV. It's a comma separated value file. Basically, it's something you can import into Google Sheets or Microsoft Excel, and just download that and put it all in a Google Sheet. That's the easiest way to do it. And then, at the bottom, you can just sum it up. There's formulas in there where you can just like select a row and hit sum. It'll add all your numbers together. So, you can get really quick profit and loss sheets. The profit and loss is basically like how much money did you make? How much money did you spend? And I would highly recommend doing this like within the first week of every single month of running a business, because if you don't know if you made or lost money last month, it's very difficult to make good decisions financially moving forward with your business. So I would highly recommend doing that every single month. It doesn't wind up actually taking that long, and it'll go a long ways ensuring the financial health of your business, which will keep stress levels down. It's kind of like an investment in yourself. So I would say go for it. And then, just watch a couple, like when I was learning how to use Google Sheets, I just like YouTubed a few videos on like 10 things you should know how to do on Google Sheets. Like, you can do all types of math on there. You can, what's really cool is like, you can add one variable to another one. And then like, you can call the answer in a different sheet too. So you can be like, whatever the answer was over here, put it over here, and then multiply that times 12 if you want to find your yearly expenses or whatever. Anyway, I don't work for Google Sheets, but maybe I should.
I think it's hilarious that we're talking about this, because this is exactly what I've been doing for the last 3 days. Because we, in the UK, our tax return deadline is this Friday. So
Yeah.
I've been like doing my tax return for this week. So it's like, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Spreadsheets.
Yeah.
As Nick will tell you, I'm really not the greatest spreadsheet kind of guy. I try to do everything like, old fashioned like ledger books, but not when it comes to running my business, but generally.
Yeah, totally. And that was me for a long, long time. And I was like, no need to do it. But we manage our projects with Google Sheets now as well, because, we have multiple people. So I'll record a video and then we'll upload it to the internet, and people will need to edit that video and then upload it to a different server. And then people are making posts on the website. And then we have social media who handles all that sort of thing. And we coordinate all of that through Google Sheets. So, just making a sheet of like, here's the episode title, like, what status is it? Is it in recording or post-production, or, is it completed? Like, has it been uploaded to the website? Like, all of that type of management, we do it all through Google Sheets. So as far as operations go, we manage the entire thing just with Sheets.
How deep do you go into tracking like the performance of each one of your videos?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to track. So like YouTube has pretty good analytics built into it already. So I would say like, go to the YouTube Creator Studio and just like do a deep dive in there and jump in the analytics and just click around and kind of see what you can find. The dashboard's pretty good too. You just get a lot of like quick insights. I would recommend Google Analytics as well. If you have a website that, you can install tracking codes on things like that. If you have a thing like a Squarespace or a Wix or some of these Shopify or like pre-built things, a lot of those will have plugins for Google Analytics, or you can contact their help team and they'll help you like insert the code, things like that. So I would definitely check out analytics. As far as like, while we're on the topic, I would get a mailing list going as soon as you possibly can. Like as soon as you get a website up, get a mailing list going, because that's the number way you're going to interact with all of your community. So if you can give some sort of thing away with your mailing list, that's going to help people get on there a little bit easier. But like get that mailing list going, like day one of your website, put that mailing list up, because you never know, someone might sign up for you. They'll forget about you 3 years later. You're going to offer a great product that they're interested in. You can send that mail out. It's going to go right to their inbox. Very hard for them to ignore. They're going to see it and be like, oh man, I really liked this company. I totally forgot about it. And they're having a sale right now. Cool. Let's go check out where have they been for the last 3 years. I might be interested in some of their products. And then boom, so super recommended to do that sort of thing. And you can use things like MailChimp is a really easy one. And you can just set up a contact form on your website. Like they just give you like JavaScript. So you could just like plug it into places. And again, if that sounds overwhelming for you, especially if you're on one of these pre-built platforms, just contact their customer service and they can usually just like put that stuff in there for you.
And whilst we're on that topic, we're super grateful because you've given us a code, CameraShake20, which is a code that any of you listeners out there can use to get a special discount for Phlearn subscription. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So basically we it's been almost 5 years now, maybe about 4 years ago. We switched our model, like our business model. Like it was a big shift internally, honestly. There was a lot of things that I didn't see coming. And, so for years we had offered like a one-off, like, right. You get like, you can buy individual tutorials. So if you just want to watch this tutorial, you can buy that tutorial on our website. Also, I should mention, we have hundreds and hundreds of free tutorials on YouTube. So, check out our free tutorials. If you like those, we have great like high and advanced tutorials on our website too. For a long time, it was just like pay as you go, like get this tutorial, whatever. About 4 years ago, we switched to a subscription model. Now you just pay either a monthly or an annual fee. The annual is nice because you get a good discount. And then you get access to all of it, every single tutorial, and it streams on the website. You can download the content and follow along with the tutorials. It's really awesome. And so that was a big learning curve for us just as a business in switching that model. There were a lot of things we anticipated, but a lot of things we didn't anticipate, because a core shift in a business like that, and I'll just mention to anyone who has a business, if you're looking to do like a legitimate core shift in your offering, I would say do that as carefully and slowly and well thought out as possible, and run as many numbers as you can, and figure out like best and worst case scenarios too, because these sort of things can be difficult. Not only did it change the way we process payments and the way that we are offering to our customers, it actually completely changed the way in which we ran our business also. So doing a fundamental shift in how we build our customers resulted in the necessity for us to do a fundamental shift in how we ran our company. So that was an unexpected thing. I looking back, I went, duh. But at the time, I didn't realize that we would everyone in the company would have to approach their jobs differently. We would have to actually functionally become a different type of company by changing our billing and the way we operated our interaction with our customers. So these are some things that I would say, like, go for it. If you think in the tech world they call it pivoting a lot of the time. which is like a nice way of saying that wasn't working out. Let's try another thing, But if you're thinking about pivoting or doing something new or a big thing, I would just say try to take your time with it. One, try to talk with a bunch of people about it. See if you can predict any sort of negative consequences from those actions. And then try to do it slowly. In business, I mean, there's multiple schools of thought. Some people are just like, hey, let's set the world on fire. Let's do everything. Let's do it really quick. Let's make it happen right now. Like, we're going to go from zero to crazy in a very short a time. I'm going to raise a ton of money and we're going to build this giant business and get, and then sell it off or do an IPO or whatever. And for a lot of people that works out. But I think that really depends on the personalities of people founding that business. For me personally, I like to do things slower because things get a lot more predictable if you slow timelines down quite a bit. Let's say you got a new project you're excited about and you're going to spend X amount of money on this project and you want to roll it out in a certain period of time. So here you do, you're spending work on development time, on marketing time. It becomes a distraction for the entire company because then everyone's kind of focused on a new project rather than kind of what you've been currently working on. And if the project hits, if it's a success, blammo, awesome, that's fantastic. But if it doesn't turn out exactly how you thought it might, then you just sunk a lot of resources into something. It's kind of like, I got a buddy a few years ago who, he bought a BMW, right? He bought a BMW, but he bought one that had someone put a supercharger in it aftermarket, and they put a cold air filter, and then they put a roll cage in it. They just did a crazy amount of stuff with it, right? So it was took a regular BMW and made it twice as fast, right? And in theory, that's all awesome. But what wound up happening is all of those things complicated the machine in a way that made it very difficult for it to be reliable. And it wound up just breaking down a lot of the time and costing him a lot of money and just kind of just being a pain in the butt. It was just it became an expensive project, whereas a car, you just want to get it from A to B, that's if a car can do that, it's a good car, right? If a car can not drain your bank account unnecessarily, it's a good thing. So anyway, sometimes in business, without even knowing it or without trying, you wind up, building a car that has a supercharger and a crazy aftermarket, blah, blah, blah on it. And it winds up being, you should have just bought a Honda Civic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That would have been a little bit better. So I guess what I'm saying is it's easier to see those decisions if you move a little bit slower and take your time a little bit more with those things. It's easy to get excited about the super expensive car with the modifications and things like that, because it's it's going to be cool. Everyone's going to love this car. It's going to go so fast and all this stuff like that. Honda Civic or, you guys are in England, so I don't know, a Fiat 500. I don't know. What's a regular car in England? I don't know.
I guess a hybrid.
Yeah,
any kind of hybrid.
Yeah. Yeah, just a regular old, a Toyota Prius or whatever.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's not going to be as flashy, but at the end of, fast forward in the future, it's going to be a lot less headaches. And there's a lot of that in business too, where it's so what we do now is if we want to do a new initiative, one, we budget for it. We figure out when can we actually afford this and what's the budget? Can we spend X amount of money and what are the expenses that we can foresee in the future? And then I always recommend keeping a buffer in the bank account, a big one if you can, as much money, just rainy days happen in business, running your own business, you got your ups and your downs, and long-term mental health, super important. So those down months come, man, I'll tell you, having to take out money to cover your expenses during down times, it's no fun. That's not a fun time, especially if you look back and you're dang, 6 months ago, I spent way more money than I needed to on this project. And now I'm having to borrow money because my bank account's low, and whatever happens, COVID happens, and you're anyway, everyone knows that's not fun. So I would say, I like to go slow with things and make sure we have the budget for them. And then also, I think a lot of pressure is like, I got to make it perfect. I got to like release the most perfect thing ever. Like you guys were just talking about at the beginning of the year, when you started your podcast, you're like, in your head, it's like, I got to make everything perfect. Episode 1, it's got to be as good as like Oprah, you know what I mean? Or whatever. It's like, but at the end of the day, like that's not realistic anyway. It's actually better to just get something up and start learning from there. And if you can get that something up for like a lot less time and money and investment, that's perfect, because, I'd rather spend less money and energy on an early stage project and then work towards making it better, because you're going to have more information then, rather than try to guess everything you need to know to make it perfect from the beginning, because you're probably going to be wrong about a lot of that stuff. So you're probably going to have to rebuild or redo a lot of it. And then that's just wasted time and energy. So, yeah.
Do you still have like some of the earliest videos that you did, when you started out 10 years ago? Do you still have them on your YouTube channel? Do you like sometimes look back at them and you kind of go, "Whoa, okay, that's funny"?
Yeah, we have a few of them for sure. Yeah, we've changed a lot of formats and a lot of just general approach to like what we not should be doing, but how we can be the most helpful for our audience. So a lot of the stuff that just like is no longer appropriate with our current brand, we remove those videos, but a lot of them are still live. It's like it really depends on a lot of the content and the approach. There's some big lessons I've learned is like with YouTube, especially, I mean, any type of content, is like get to the meat of the content as fast as you possibly can, because people are busy. They got other stuff to do. Like if you can get something across in 3 minutes, don't spend 5 minutes trying to do it, just like get in and get out. Like at the end of the day, you make a good product, people are going to stick around. Like I used to spend a lot of time just talking about myself and my life and doing like really long intros and just like stuff that like no one really cares about. Like my family might care how I'm doing on a Thursday or what I had for dinner, but like even they probably don't really care that much what I had for dinner, like. So I would say like get that content as soon as possible if you can. And, the other thing is like personality is going to happen. Like injecting your personality. I wouldn't say like overdo trying to inject personality into your content, because like you can't actually help but to put your personality into your content. Like, you don't have to put fluff in there. You can just like give regular information and people will get a sense of your personality through that process. So, I always say like with every video, like figure out what you want to say, like get that message across. It's like, if I want to teach you how to make scrambled eggs, like in the first 10 seconds of that video, it's like, I'm going to show you how to make scrambled eggs. Cool.
Yeah.
Now I know what I'm going to watch in this video. Am I interested in making scrambled eggs? No, I'm not going to watch the video. Cool. I didn't waste anyone's time with that. I like to give them a little preview. I'm going to show you how to make scrambled eggs. I like to do it this way because I find that my eggs don't turn out runny and they're nice and soft. They're not hard like they can be with scrambled eggs. It's quick and it's easy, and you'll be here for 3 minutes, whatever. So I like to give them a little bit of like a, what you're going to get. It's like a preview for a movie. Yeah. And then right from there, it's like, all right, step number 1, crack the eggs. Step blah, 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 blah. And then at the end, I like to summarize it up. And then if there are any like actual tips and tricks that I've learned throughout the years, I do my best to tell them why. It's like, okay, so why did I do this here and here? I did it because of this reason. And if you do it the other way, it can wind up messing you up in with your eggs or your Photoshop tutorials or your photography or whatever it is. But
I remember at college, I had one of the public speaking classes, or one of the performance classes. One of the professors used to say, like, tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them, and then tell them what you just told them. And that structure is like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And I've used that ever since. Whenever I public speak.
Definitely.
So.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And that's great. That's great format for really any type of content, I would say, and I hopefully try to do your best to stay on topic. And then, especially like YouTube is fantastic because it's recorded video. You can edit it, like if you don't like your intro, make another one. No one's ever going to know, So it's like, there's a weird like hurdle to get. I think there's, especially with videos of people's, of themselves, there's a few hurdles. One is getting used to the sound of your own voice. Everyone knows like, oh God, I sound like that. Ugh.
Yep.
But yes, you do sound like that. And that's how everyone else hears you. So just be cool with it if you can,
yeah.
Like,
episode 11 was the breaking point for me. I think when we got to episode 11, I decided to not give a damn anymore. Before that, it was like, it's like I was listening. I really wasn't able to actually listen to a whole episode before that because I would just get annoyed by having to listen to my own voice. And this sounds funny because I seem to talk a lot, but actually I've never really, like many people, I think like almost everyone, when you hear your own voice recorded, it's cringy. It's like,
it's very cringy.
Don't worry, Kay. It actually is cringy. It's fine.
Well, the problem is I know that Nick puts his audio magic on it and makes me sound not as terrible as I really sound.
You're right, though. It's a weird. It's like getting your picture taken. You're like, I don't like that. Yeah. You know what I mean? But like at the end of the day, that is how you sound. That's how everyone in the world hears you. Yeah. Like we have this, so. It takes a little time to get over that, I will say. So like, make a few videos, make a few audio recordings, just, make, like you said, make 10, 20 of them. And you don't even have to show people the first 10 or 20. That can just be, you're getting used to the sound of your own voice period of time. That's a great idea. I just heard a really good podcast, Rolling Stone Music Now. It's on Spotify. They just did like a deep dive on Radiohead, which like I'm definitely 15 years too late to the party, but I've become a big Radiohead fan recently. And they said with Radiohead that they played as a band for 7 years together before they ever started touring and before they ever started going live and doing albums. So they just kept that stuff to themselves. They figured out how to get good. They figured out how to work together. They figured out their sound. And then when they were ready, they went and presented that to the world. And, 7 years is a long time. Like most bands aren't even together for 7 years. So anyway, by the time they were ready to like show the public who they were comfortable with their sound. They know how they sounded. They knew how to work together. So I would say like, if you're going to do anything like this, like, just make a few and then don't even publish them. Just like watch them yourself and be like, ooh, I should change that. Or like, this is getting boring. Why am I bored with myself right now? Or whatever, there's a lot of opportunity that you can take to, just experiment with yourself and send it to some friends and be like, what do you think of this? And, the brutally honest friends will tell you, most people just be like, it's great, but I don't know, maybe give them some whiskey and then figure out what they actually think about your stuff. But so getting over that sort of thing, it is a real hurdle. It's a real thing. But once you get past all that stuff, it's makes things a little bit easier.
Yeah. How long did it take you to kind of get over that when you first started?
I would say 6 months. And then okay, so where I'm at now, and this is the hardest part too, is that like putting on a personality for your videos is like a thing. And it's like very, very difficult for me to not put a personality on over top of my regular personality when I make videos. And I'm 10 years in and I have not mastered that. And honestly, I think, okay, so when you're doing that, it's kind of like acting. And great actors, it doesn't seem like they're acting, right? It just seems like they're just being themselves. It's like, that's just that person, and I think that's kind of the goal is just to like...
It's especially those actors who always seem to be playing the same role in every movie. Hey, Brad Pitt. Just to say that.
Yeah, but he's also been a relevant actor for quite a few years and is doing very well. So it's like, I mean, if the shoe fits, if this role is right for Samuel L. Jackson, there's no other person who should be playing that role. You know what I mean? Like, who you're gonna get when you cast that individual. And that's a strength, in my opinion. It's not, I mean, of course, there's all types of ways to approach these things, but, at the end of the day, that's what makes us unique. That's what makes us who we are. And I would say approaching that type of content, like the best you can do to like, just if you were having that conversation with like a family member or a person you're close with, like if you can take that type of tone and just like mentality to it and comfort level. And these are not easy things. I still struggle with them. But that's kind of my goal, when I do this thing is like, I don't want to be like talking at people in videos. I want it to feel more like we're together, like we're hanging out, but if I'm talking to a camera, that's, you gotta use your imagination a little bit. But I just find like, the best things you can do to keep your stress levels down, that really helps out. So it's easy to be like worked up in your head and just be like, I got to make this intro perfect. And then, I have a tendency to like talk too loud or like get too excited or like try to make every word I sound perfect. But in the end, the videos that I make where I'm just like, hey, we're going to learn how to do this stuff. It's going to be awesome. Here's why I think it's cool. Blah, 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 blah. Let's get into it. Those wind up just feeling a lot better. The ones where I'm like, hi guys, welcome to the channel. It's like, all right, dude, you don't talk like that. So, but it's hard.
I'd say this really reminds me of when there was a time in my career, so when I was still like a full-time gigging musician, I sort of made a transition from playing electric guitar in bands and everything to being a solo acoustic guitar artist. So it's just me on stage playing instrumental guitar music, basically. And the hardest thing for me at the time was not the playing part, although it was weird not being part of a band, but the hardest part for me was the communicating with the audience in between the tracks, because I had one of the things I used to do was I used to retune my guitar all the time. So I used to use different tunings, and I needed a minute and a half in between tracks so that I could retune my guitar. And of course, it's intrinsically stupid if you don't say anything to the audience because it's just weird, right? You just stand there, you tune your guitar. Well, hey, it's tuning again. And so you have to somehow bring the audience in. And I tried all sorts of different things because I was really uncomfortable with that. Like at first, I would literally script lines. I would think about what I was going to say, and I was literally learning lines like an actor. That completely bombed. That was terrible because I'm not an actor. It's really so like learning lines for me. I like bumble my lines and I can't remember how. It was terrible, total train wreck. And then I kind of thought, oh, maybe if I tell some jokes, I just tell some jokes, right? And I tried that, and that didn't work. And eventually, after I don't know, like 150, 200 gigs in, I realized that all I had to do was really just be myself. That was it. And so what I would talk to people about was one trick I used was I was focusing on one person. Like if out of the whole crowd, I would focus in on one person, and it would literally make it feel like I'm having a conversation with this one person rather than being intimidated by this crowd of people. All the eyes are on you, and especially when you're the only person, and I'm not necessarily the most extrovert kind of personality either. So it always feels like quite intimidating when everybody looks at your hands. And it's like, out of the 100 people in the room, 90 of them at least are other guitarists. And so they're judging everything that you do, And so really it was like, once I got to the point where I realized, okay, I'm going to hone in on one person and I'm just going to be myself, and I'm going to talk about things that actually happened to me in my life, like real things. At the time, I had a baby daughter, and all sorts of crazy stuff happens when you have a baby daughter. Like every day, something crazy happens. So you have like endless material that you can just talk about. And I found that really made that a lot easier. I felt more comfortable doing it, and actually, it took all the stress away because it wasn't a thing anymore after that. It was just like, okay, it's just how. And it worked. Actually, I think it really had a positive effect on the audience as well. I kind of felt that people were, I don't know, just friendlier, and because they seemed like weirdly, people seemed like they got to know me beyond just the music, which is always is kind of a weird thing.
Yeah, that's good advice.
So that took
probably just seem more like a regular person. I think like, all those magazines where it's like all the celebrity magazines where it's like so-and-so's dating so-and-so. It's like, oh, look who's breaking up. Like, like look who's drinking Starbucks, like all that stuff. I think they're popular because it just makes these idols look like regular people. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, they just do the same crap I do. Like, it's like they're also wearing sweatpants to the grocery store. Like, it's okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And even a magazine, I wouldn't say that I ever made it into a celebrity magazine or anything, but it's just, it's this kind of thing. I think when you're, when you're performing, and in a sense you are performing, when you're videoing yourself and you're talking to a camera, that is to an extent that is sort of a bit of a performance, but it's this, it's this kind of thing of like just being yourself. My wife always says this to me. She always says like, when you talk to camera, your voice changes and your accent changes too. And it's like, I don't realize that at all because I always think that I talk the same way I always talk, but apparently.
It's a weird thing. One trick that I do is I'll start a sentence before my actual, all right. So if I got a line, especially like if I mess up in a tutorial, which happens all the time, I'll get to a point in which I don't even know what I'm going to say next. So I'll use that as a natural stop and then I'll try to continue on. So I'll give you an example. Okay. So I'm going to explain something about, for those of you guys on the podcast who can't see me right now, I have a shirt with a bunch of flowers on it. So I'll just be like, okay, so I have the shirt and I like it because it's got a bunch of flowers on it. It's nice and colorful and it makes me feel bright and happy. And then I don't even know what I'm going to say next about my shirt, right? But I'll use that as a natural pause because I make recorded video. I don't make live videos. So this is no help for people who make live video, but for recorded video, I'll do a natural pause. And then I know I just got to pick it up from there again. So then I'll think about what I'm going to say. And then I'll be like, And then when I wear the shirt, people are always like, hey, I like your cool shirt. And then we can have a conversation. So that's another reason why I like the shirt. So I'll just take that natural pause. But sometimes getting my tone of voice back to like normal is really difficult. So what I do is I do like blah, blah words. And then I go back into my normal tone of voice. So I actually will say like, blah, 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 this thing, that thing, going over here. And then the other thing I like about my shirt is that it's like bright and colorful and people tend to say like, hey, I like your shirt. And then we can have a conversation and then make new friends. So that like blah, 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 talkity over here, blah, 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 it kind of makes your voice into like a normal voice again. And then you can just start picking that up. And so I do that for my intros. I do that for my outros. Anything that I need a script, I do just some blah, blah, blah words first that gets my voice into a normal talking rhythm. And then I just go from there and just kind of just talk normal.
Did you go, when you first started out, did you go through like different sort of tryouts? Like, did you try and like script the whole tutorial, or did you try and free flow that, or like how did you end up where you are now in your
I'm
your
far
routine?
Too lazy to ever have tried to script anything word for word. And I was like, I'm gonna memorize 20 minutes of scripted. Like that is not. Bullet points usually like that's usually good for, and if it's a complicated thing, I'll just write my bullet points and I'll have them in a way that I can see what I'm doing. And then I try to do that in a way to where like people don't really see that I'm looking at my bullet points. And then again, because I'm making recorded content and it's edited, I have space to mess up and I have space to take my time. And if I realize I don't know what I'm talking about or something just sounded off, I'll stop myself, I'll think about it for a second, and then I'll try it again. So it's a luxury of recorded video. I would say, if you're doing live performance, especially, I have a friend who does stand-up comedy, and man, she's incredible. But what she does, says the same jokes night after night after night. She gets a lot of practice in. But what this does is it gets her to the point where she's so comfortable telling these jokes that she can do that in a live audience and everything can just kind of like roll one into the other. And you don't need that period of time to like, what am I going to say next? Or you kind of like have it all lined up because it's ready to go. So recorded content versus live content, obviously super, super different. Yeah, but with recorded, I'll just make some bullet points and be like, here's what I want to talk about it. Like you said, tell them what they're going to learn, then teach them the thing, and then tell them what they just learned. And then I take plenty of breaks. Sometimes if an episode we release on YouTube 8 minutes long, fully edited, it might take me 15 minutes of actual recorded video to make that video because I mess up a bunch of times. And then sometimes what happens is I'm just like sleepy or whatever, like hungover. It's just like life happens, right? And sometimes I'll make a video and I'm like, that sucked. Like that, I can do way better than that. So I'll just like do it again the next day. Like, sometimes I'm just like that whole day, like this happened, a couple of weeks ago. I recorded an hour and a half worth of content. And at the end of it, I was like, man, that's just sucked. I was like talking in circles, taking twice as much time as I needed to explain simple concepts. And I don't want to publish that. I don't want that out forever. I don't want that, being a reflection of me, because recorded content is like, once it's out, it's out. You know what I mean? It's like, my wife was in the room and we were talking about it. I was like, it's like a band, right? Like if everyone's like feeling like crap, that's not the day when you want to record your album, right? Well, I don't know anything about music. Kirsten, you know a lot more about this, but in my mind, I was like, let's just wait till the day when we all feel good and record the album on that day, exactly. Right? So I do the same with my videos, like if it ain't working, it ain't working. And if it's recorded content, no pressure. What really helps out is just staying as ahead as possible. So I do my very best, and it's tough because every life comes in the way, but when possible, trying to stay like weeks or months ahead of time in recorded content is really, really nice. That way, whatever happens, Thursday comes around and you're not feeling too good, no pressure, because you've got content queued up for the next couple of weeks or months. So
yeah,
do you batch record? So do you do multiple videos on the same day, or do you just stick with one and that's it?
Yeah, I definitely, as much as possible. And sometimes I'll like batch week record. I go into different periods of time. So sometimes I'll try to get like a month's worth of the recorded video in a week. So so we release a free YouTube tutorial featuring yours truly once a week, and we have done for like 10 years. It's long, so sometimes, especially if I know I've got some stuff coming up, like actually in my life right now, I've got a lot on my plate for basically like the next 4 months. There's just a lot of stuff I've got going on. So what I'm going to be doing is basically setting aside like a few weeks of time and like doing almost nothing else but record, so I can have all that stuff in the hopper. And then I've got people who edit the videos, which is really, really nice. So as long as I can like get all that part done, they can do their part and everyone can do their part, and it kind of gets it all done. So yeah, definitely. If I know that I've got something coming up, I'll just knock out as much as I possibly can. But if I'm in recording mood, and for me, it's like a whole thing. Like recording is like, that starts the day before, that's like, let me eat right, let me exercise, let me go to bed, let me get my thoughts straight. Like I'm going to wake up knowing exactly what I'm going to record. Like I'm going to prep everything beforehand. I'm going to have my images. I'm going to know what I'm going to say. I'm going to have my outline, and it's good to go. So recording day, I'm not thinking about, anything else. In an ideal situation, obviously things happen, but I'm just like, I'm going to do it. And then I would say like on a normal day, I'll try to record like 2 free episodes in a day. On like a bangers day, maybe 3 or 4 episodes in a day. And then we record like full length pro tutorials for our subscription service on our website. And those are longer, like anywhere from an hour to like sometimes like 4 hours. So that's going to be like 3 or 4 days of back-to-back recording. So I'll kind of like block off a lot of time. But yeah, as ahead as possible, because it especially the weird thing is time. Like, okay, so again, it's been a while. It's been our YouTube channel turns 10 years old, which in terms of YouTube is like, I got like a geriatric walker in terms of YouTube. Like it's been a while, right? But like last week, our most popular video, this is a good example. Like early January, our most popular video on our YouTube channel was a video I made like 4 years ago on how to set up a Wacom tablet. And for you guys who don't know, it's a pressure sensitive tablet you can use with Photoshop. But a lot of people got one for Christmas and they didn't know how to use it. So they watched my video from 4 years ago on how to set it up and use it. So
I think that may have been me watching that. I mean, it pushed your numbers up there.
Thank you. Push those numbers up. That was just like a thing that happened, So that was our number one video that got watched like that week, because a lot of people just got a tablet and didn't know what to do with it. But that got a lot of comments. And a lot of people. They don't look at the dates of when stuff's recorded. They don't know chronological order. They don't know, or especially with YouTube, most people don't even care. I mean, you got a couple people who are like going to watch like just about whatever you record, and, subscribers who will ding that bell and try to keep up to date. But like, honestly, most people watching our content think that something I made 4 years ago is recent. They think I made it last week, So chronology works a little bit different with these platforms than it does in real life. So I guess what I'm saying is, like, to us, it's like I have early on the desire to be like, I got to record it this week and I got to get it out this week. Like, that's important. But when you stretch a time period out, 5-10 years, like, let's think about like albums from our favorite artists, right? Like, if you like their third album more than their sixth album, it doesn't really matter when they release those albums, right? Like, at the end of the day, it's all just like, here's a bunch of content. Some people are going to gravitate towards one more than the other. So I would say the tendency to be like, I got to record it now and I got to get it out now. That's something that we found isn't really that important, actually. And honestly, like, if a Simon and Garfunkel album came out today that they recorded, in their early career, I'd be like thrilled about that. You know what I mean? I'd be like, yes, like, this is the last tracks, like, yes, please. I don't care that you recorded this 40 years ago. Like, I want to hear it right now. So, we record our videos ahead of time, and as much ahead of time as possible, because it makes it way easier on our team, because hitting deadlines is tough and life gets in the way.
And the thing is, of course, as soon as you don't make that particular deadline, then of course you got a problem, because then if you're beating yourself up about being inconsistent. Although I always wonder how really important that is. If you miss a week, it's not the end of the world. Like, nobody got killed, let's put it this way, right? It's all good. But like, for us, for instance, we, I think at the very beginning, because when we first started this podcast, as our avid listeners will know by now, we started in the same position, or in the same situation that we're in now, where we're both in our respective homes and we're recording ourselves, at home. And then, of course, what happened was that towards the end of the first lockdown, we were basically allowed to be in the same room again. And then what happens is we're normally on the set, sitting opposite each other, talking to each other, and then talking to a guest on the screen. And now we're back to where we started, in a way. And I think in the beginning, it was like, okay, we have to do this on a Monday because we've got to get this episode out on a Thursday. And so over time, we've also really realized that pre-recording, like batch recording a number of episodes and having some in the pipeline, really de-stresses the whole process. I know, Nick, you must feel that really with the editing, right?
Oh, man. Yeah. I mean, editing takes so much longer, or can take so much longer than the recording process, even depending on how it goes, right? And when you get into the flow of doing it, all of a suddenly doing editing 3 podcasts in a row takes a time that two it might have done 2 before, something like that. And so on top of that, because we're recording our main sets in my home, I try to leave like general things set up, but I don't want to have to set all this gear up every single time. It goes back to what you were saying earlier about having a dedicated space. I can't really have that. So the more we get in to record in 1 week that we can, the better, because I'll just leave everything set up, ready to go. Don't have to think about it. You can just focus on the guest. And that's really what it's all about. So yeah, I'm all over the batch, and being, several weeks in advance if we can, make you so much less stressful.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, musicians do it, right? They'll spend years recording an album and then release it all at the same time or whatever, maybe some singles or whatever, but they're not recording a song and then publishing it the next day. It's like, because the other thing is too, is, sometimes like we try as we may, but we don't always have hits, it's like, you got to show up every day. And that's the other thing about content too, is like, it's very difficult to predict what is going to be a hit. I think sometimes we know right when we hit and we're like, that was awesome. People are going to like that episode, but it might not be the most popular episode. Something you do on something like total. I mean, it'll happen often where in the same month, I'll talk about some like awesome new technique in Photoshop that I'm super excited about, that I think is going to like change everyone's lives and be like, man, people are just going to like be in love with this. And then I'll make another video that's just like how to use a relatively simple tool in Photoshop that I feel like advanced users probably already know how to use. And the video that gets way more views is the simple tool video, which is was not as exciting for me, but for whatever reason, just has a lot more broad appeal, and a lot of people gravitated. And it constantly surprises us, we go back through our analytics and look at, month by month and 6 months and all of our performance to see like, okay, what were the hits of the last 6 months and how do we try to replicate that? But like, very difficult to predict. I feel like it's just everyone in general. It's tough to predict what's going to be a hit. And then, so the biggest advice that, I have when it comes to creating content is just create as much of it as you can and try to do your best every single time and try to put some good energy into it, and release like the best product that you know how to release. But it can be very difficult. And then also like, I think there's a lot of preconceptions about like quote unquote viral videos and stuff like that. And my experience is like, one, don't even worry about that. Two, it's not really a thing. So don't spend your time to make viral videos because you can't predict what gets picked up. And I have friends who have had like viral videos picked up, and that one video gets like crazy views, but then none of their other videos get much views either, right? So all in all, it didn't help out the channel. Or like, you'll get a call from whatever they want to feature or something or whatever, and you're like, this is going to be it. This is the big break in business. Like from here on, we're set. We don't have to work as hard. We're going to make so much more money. It's going to be crazy. That sort of thing pretty much never happens also. It's like, it's pretty much just like, it's kind of like, I don't know, for anyone who looks at, I like to think about life kind of like the stock market a little bit. I'm not like a stock analyst or whatever, but like anyone who's ever seen the stock market, like it just goes up and down like this, and like over a long period of time, it might go like slowly up and down, but it's going like in a day, it'll go up some and then down some. And then a week, it'll go down a little bit more. And the next week, it'll go up a little bit more. If you average all that stuff out, it'll just kind of tend to trend upwards. But like life, like you get some days where like everything's going right, you're in a great mood and you get everything. And then the next day you're like sick and, you're whatever, you stub your toe and you're mad at something else and you check your bank account and you realize, oh God, I spent way more money than I should have. And now I'm strapped for cash. Like that's just kind of life. It's up and down, up and down, up and down, and up and down. And, so I feel like it's kind of like the same thing with video recording. So the best thing that I my advice, the only thing that's ever worked is just like keep going, just like keep making content, doing your best. You don't know what's going to hit. You don't want to know it's going to be a success. Take your successes in stride and your failures in stride, because that it's just part of the rhythm of business and part of the rhythm of life. So, you know, you got a success that comes your way. Cool. Like, appreciate it, love it. Don't spend all the money you get from it if it's a financial success, because tomorrow could be, you know, a valley. Tomorrow could be a down, and you don't want that to pull you down so much. So it all kind of averages out in the end. And as long as you're doing a good job and producing good quality content, it'll be an upward trend. But, you know, try to ignore those peaks and valleys as much as possible. I know it's difficult because, you know, we're emotional creatures, but if you look at the averages, that's a little bit more sustainable long term.
I know you mentioned there about looking at the analytics and whatnot about how can we replicate this for, you know, these X videos and so forth. But one thing that has truly baffled me about channels like yours, the size that yours is, I mean, you've got at last look, you had between 800 and 900 videos on there at the minute, and that obviously doesn't include ones that you've removed over time, right? And what has really baffled me about channels your size is how do you continually come up with a different topic to do a video on? Because it's just, I suspect it gets easier as time progresses, but it's certainly in those initial days of someone, and I've noticed from experience, having tried this myself in the past, is you get to 30 odd topics or something like that, and you go, I'm out. I have no idea what to do next.
Yeah.
How do you go about that?
That's a great question, because it's weird. It kind of gets easier and then it gets harder and then it gets easier and then harder. So the way that I like to think about it is like, okay, like we have, you know, scientists out there, like PhD scientists, like somewhere in the world, there's some scientists who spent their entire career studying like a little frog that only lives in one tide pool in the middle of a country we've never heard of. You know what I mean? And they know everything in the world about that frog. And they spend their entire career talking about that little frog, you know? And that seems like, how could that be? How could that be? You know? And then you have the other person who's just like talking about frogs in general. And they're like, I ran out of stuff to talk about frogs. But like, actually, there's an entire libraries to talk about with this one little frog that this one scientist is studying. So it's like, it's weird because content, it can be done in a lot of different ways, and it can be packaged together in a lot of different ways as well. And it's like, so for instance, the pen tool in Photoshop, it's a tool that you can use to cut things out. I've probably made 100 videos using the pen tool, at least, maybe even more. But I approach the tool differently as time goes by. You know, one could be like, here's my top 5 favorite tips for the pen tool. You know, one could be like, here's a really, really, really detailed explanation of the keyboard shortcuts and how I get more efficient using the pen tool. One could be how to cut out a shape from its background where I use the pen tool. So some of them can be tool oriented, some of them can be output oriented, some of them can be lifestyle oriented. You know, there's a lot of different ways in which you can approach basically the same thing. And what is interesting is a couple things. One is that especially like YouTube or anywhere where there are large audiences of people, the audience will come in waves, right? So like most of the people who are pretty heavily active on YouTube in my channel currently, they're not the same people who were active 5 years ago, and they're not the same people who were active 10 years ago. Some of them, maybe, I hope they are. And, you know, if you're listening to this, thank you. That's awesome. Like, yes, let's, you know, stick around. We got more good stuff coming. But a lot of the time it's new people and they don't even know what you made like 10 years ago. And chances are you're probably better at making it now than you were ago. So a lot of the stuff we do is we'll just make the same type of video that we released years ago, and we'll just try to do a better job. We'll try to make it shorter and more succinct and have interesting examples and let people download it and things like that. So we'll revisit a similar topic. Then you have more like lifestyle stuff. Like here's the top tips that I learned in this program or that program for this year, and then you can just make one of those every year. There's a lot of different ways to kind of like approach similar information from different ways. It's like, people who write 6 books on the same subject. It's like, what are you talking about? But they focus on different minutia every single time. So, but one thing that we do, we do keyword research. So if you don't have any background with like SEO, search engine optimization, or keyword research or any of that stuff, like see if you can find a friend who knows stuff like that, because there are a lot of great tools out there. Like people are searching in YouTube for new stuff all day. They're searching in Google for new stuff all day. And you can actually get access to that information of what people are actually actively searching for. There's tools that these companies provide, like Google Tag Manager and Keyword Researcher. You have, I have someone who helps me out with this sort of thing. But recently, we just compiled a list of 150 video titles that people are searching for on the internet. And from that, we're going to go through and call that and use that in combination with like user suggestions and other new features and things like that to then just work on our roadmap for like the next 6 months of content for our different channels. So there's a lot of ways you can do it. I would say, use as much data as possible. Like if you had a episode video that was just like wildly possible, like go back and rewatch it and be like, what about it was great? Like, were we like in a great mood that day? Like, did everything just kind of click? Was the editing fun and snappy? Like, what was it about that video that you think was a standout? And then try to replicate that and push that to your videos moving forward. So it's a lot of guess and check. It's a lot of just like figuring out, what's the pattern. But, as we've seen with like Disney remaking every one of their animated classics into a, live action movie, that to me is an example of we all don't really know what's going to be a hit, do we? Like, Disney's like, well, Aladdin was a hit when we animated it, and we got to make more videos this year, so let's just make a live action one. They did the same with Beauty and the Beast. They did the same thing with Jungle Book. They're just going to keep doing it until all their old classics are live actions. And, like personally, I actually like the original animated ones before, but they can't stop making videos. They're just doing whatever they can do to keep making content. And then they hit like on a Moana every now and then, which is like the best ever, right? But it's like, then the year after that, they come out with, and then Toy Story 3 is like awesome, but then Toy Story 4 is like not that awesome. You know what I mean? So, and it's like this Disney, they got all the money, they got all the creative people, and they're still like trying to figure it out. So it's tough, but basically you just got to kind of keep throwing stuff at the wall and see what sticks.
I tell you one thing I really like about the Phlearn Pro side of things, the subscription service, is that you've got these learning paths on there. That's right. I find that really to me was like game changer. Like, because like many people, I think like probably almost all people, when you go onto YouTube and you have a particular problem that you're trying to solve by way of finding a video that explains how to do something very specific, like using a pen tool or doing a particular technique. The standard thing is probably like how to cut out hair or something like that. That would be like a standard kind of a thing. And you sort of have to, on YouTube, of course, because there's the sea of videos, you kind of have to find your own way through that. And that in itself can sometimes be frustrating because, as it always is in creative fields, especially I guess in Photoshop and in retouching and everything else, you solve one little problem and then you realize that there's 10 other problems down the road. And then you find a video to solve this, and it seems like a never-ending story. And when I saw this, when I saw the kind of the learning path thing, I thought, brilliant, awesome, wicked. That's actually exactly what I need for this particular issue that I have, and I love it. Cool. It's great, man.
Oh, thanks so much. I'm going to tell Mike about that because it was his idea and he implemented that. So good job, Mike. And I'm going to send him a message right after this.
Yeah, because again, coming from a music background, and Nick's the same. You can attest to that too. Like having taught guitar or having taught music lessons for a long time, you have to have a structure to your lessons over time, because you're trying to get somebody who's a beginner to be, a proficient player. And just like teaching standalone individual lessons, is so much more effective if you put it on a path and you have a track that you go down. You know exactly. Once you get to this lesson there, you would have learned all these things, and then you can build on that. It's like a house of Legos. It's like a house of bricks. Basically, you just build one thing onto that, and it's just so much more effective if you have that path laid out for you. So that's how I enjoy that.
Right on, cool.
Yeah, and and of course, if people want to check that out, there is a special code. We mentioned that earlier, which is CameraShake20, which gives you 20% off an annual subscription, which is flipping awesome.
Yeah, and then you guys can watch all the videos, and you get get a lot more of me talking about Photoshop. So. It's it's super fun, but I'm going to let Mike know that those learning paths really made a difference. And we'll make sure to feature those and make more of them. But yeah, I would say, when it comes to content, it's like you got short-term and then long-term content. So like, one of the things that we try to do is, figure out, okay, what's this thing that we're going to make next? But then how does it fit into the overall catalog, and how does it fit into the overall mission and goal of our content in general? And I think just like you said, like if you can approach that sort of thing with like a holistic view, that's a really good idea. So, just like with everything, practice and organization and pre-production. I think that these are big things that they're not the most fun and they're easy to look over. But like with the guitar, right? Like you would never just get up on stage the first time you held a guitar and be like, I'm going to play you guys a great song. Like,
yeah,
you guys spend a long time practicing alone in your room and making mistakes and things like that. And I would say, same thing with any type of video production or any new project that you're doing. Like it's okay to spend time practicing and figuring things out, and then like dedicate time, like I would say to anyone who's going to start any type of channel, like try to get a little bit of a strategy going on, but beforehand be like, okay, cool. Like where do I want this to look like at the end of the year? Like what are some episodes that I'm most excited about making? And then, write a list, spend like a couple days and like put a Google Sheet together. Hey, Google Sheet again. But put a big Google Sheet together and like write out all of your ideas that you possibly have, and then like see how they kind of like flow into one another and be like, oh, it'd be cool if I made this one first and then that one, because then, I could build on the knowledge from this one to that one. And then, kind of work through that. So I would say, just like, the recording process takes time, the editing process takes time. I would say give as much time as you can to like initial thought about the content of your videos. That way you can look back on the end of the year and be like, man, look at this cool flow we had from beginning to end of our content. It all like follows a logical flow because you figured that out at the beginning of the year. And then the nice thing from there is, it's Thursday in the middle of the year and you're like, what am I going to make next? You can be like, oh, I already figured this out at the beginning of the year. Here's the video we're going to make next. Let's just make that. And then we'll make the one after that. It takes a lot of pressure off. So I would say dedicating time to, each individual project like this and planning out as much as possible. It's like, the blueprints for a house. You would never hire your contractors to build a house before you had the blueprints. So planning content out, I would say it's one of those things that might not be the most fun, but it's hard to build a good foundation if you don't have a plan.
So what are your future plans with Phlearn? What's coming up next?
What's coming up next? More of the good old same thing that we've been doing for a long time. I don't, tough to talk about the future in general, because it's like, as we've seen, like with recent world events, like it's very difficult to predict for the future. But when I look at the future, I look at the past, and I'm like, what's worked in the past? Let's try to keep doing that as best as we can and try to refine and make that better. It's like, if someone were to ask me what's going to happen with the future of like Apple, the company that makes like the iPhone and computers, what are they probably going to do? They're probably going to make more iPhones, right? There's going to be a new iPhone. It's going to be a little bit better than the last one. They're probably going to make more computers. They'll be a little bit better than the last one. They'll probably make more headphones that'll be a little bit better than the last one. And they might come out with a couple like here and there projects, things like that. But really what they're going to do is they're going to make an iPhone 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 20, 30, whatever. And yeah, do their best with whatever happens in the world around them. So I know that's like a weird question, but I don't know. I think sometimes when I speculate too far into the future, I'm just like usually really wrong about what the future holds. And then I wind up eating my words. So I'm like, it's like, well, I've been doing almost the same exact thing for 10 years now. And it's been great. And if I can spend the next 10 years doing the almost exact same thing, and it'd be great too, that puts a big smile on my face, and I don't have to worry about predicting the future. Just doing my best to, make sure that I can come out with my version of the iPhone 25. Let's approach every day, give it our best, like study from the past, history tends to repeat itself. So, sometimes, and cycles are difficult to predict. Sometimes you get 100-year cycles, 1,000-year cycles, million-year cycles, daily cycles, these things exist. So, I would say if anyone, I'm a little bit of a new history. I've become newly interested in reading about history, just with the realization that kind of like things tend to repeat. You get different iterations, it's like things change a little bit, but it's like, what's happening right now in the world happened like 100 years ago too. Not the exact same thing, but like a shade of it, like this might be blue and that was teal. But like, they're on the same spectrum in a lot of ways. And in 100 years, So I love history for that reason, because it just kind of makes it a little bit more apparent that like, like technology is going to change, the earth is going to change, but people are fundamentally, as a whole, they're going to be acting the same way they did now 500 years in the past and 500 years in the future. And hopefully we learn from our mistakes and continue to grow. And I think we will, just as society and humans evolve, and we all get closer through, technology and things like that. And I think it's going to help bring the human race back together again. And I think it's going to be really fantastic. But I do expect a lot of what happened a few hundred years ago to happen again in the future, but in different iterations. So, again, these things happen, so difficult to predict the future, but, But
Phlearn is still going to be around in the future. That's for sure.
Yeah, we're going to be around, Yeah, we're going to be around, as long as people want to watch Photoshop videos and other types of content. Yeah, we're going to do our best, and we're going to continue to put out the best type of content we can, and hopefully people like it. And, we do our best with what the situation's, at hand. Long answer to a very simple question, but
well, Aaron, it was such a pleasure to have you on the show. Yes. On that note, I'm just going to say that all the links are obviously going to be in the show notes and in the description. You'll also find the CameraShake 20 link code in there. So check it out. Check out Phlearn. Check out Phlearn.com. It's a real education for sure. And of course, if there's any problem you thought you ever had when it comes to Photoshop, Lightroom, and such, there was going to be a solution for you on YouTube right now. So don't forget to check that out. With that being said, again, Aaron, it was an absolute pleasure. There were a whole ton of things that I wanted to talk to you about that we haven't actually covered. So hopefully at some point in the future, we'll have you back on the show. It'll be super awesome. Because
let's do it.
there's a whole thing like about your 365 selfies that I want to talk to you about. But we'll cover that. We'll cover that some other time. So, Aaron, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This was so much fun. I just kind of blabbed and didn't get to your list of questions, but it's been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for having me on today. I really appreciate it.
So we've come to the end of episode 41 of the Camera Shake podcast. As always, all of our links are in the description. We are on Instagram at Camera Shake podcast. We are on Twitter as well at Shake Camera. We're also on YouTube. Obviously, if you're listening to the audio version, check us out on www.youtube.com/Camera Shake. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, all the good stuff. And if you're listening to this episode on Apple Podcast, do us a favor and scroll down and leave us a little review and a little star rating. That would really help us out because it just means that our podcast can be found much more easily. So that would be superb. So all you have to do is go to the show page, scroll all the way to the bottom, and you'll see a little section where you can leave a review. We would love it if you could do that for us. Apart from that, we'll see you again next Thursday with yet another fun-filled episode. So take it easy, have a good week, and we'll be back next week.